right, another episode of Tech on Ice coming at you. So today I thought it's topical, obviously, but I think I wanted to talk a little bit about open source and one of the not really discussed or hidden benefit of open source. And for folks watching this, DeepSeek is kind of taking up all of the tech energy right now. Um, One, because I think it's putting a lot of thought around how LLMs and AI models are built and all of that. And there's some speculation around how much it actually costs and all of that, but I'm not here to discuss that. Um, but one of the big interesting things about DeepSeek is that it's open source, meaning that the AI startup, the company or whatever you want to call it, the research group, put out a white paper, explaining how they did it all, how they were able to, you know, build this model with, you know, under the typical capacity needed from a chip's perspective, and all of that sort of great stuff. And with that, I think it's important to talk about why this is great from an open source perspective. Because when people think about open source, they're like, okay, well, people get to, you know, reuse software that's being built by, people, and it's advantageous from a cost perspective. And, you have, if it's a large open source project, there's community behind it, and even big companies in some particular situations. There's all these benefits to open source. And yes, there's some drawbacks too, and we can talk about those at some point in the future. But I wanted to specify like one really important part about open source that is probably a bit spicy, but it's also not talked about as much, and that's the fact that open source drives innovation at closed source or for-profit software. And I'll just explain why. And I'll use DeepSeek as an example. Meta and OpenAI and Anthropic are reading that information that was put out by DeepSeek and figuring out what they did in order to make their products better. And that in and of itself is great for the overall AI consumer of LLM community, because hopefully it raises the bar for all of these things. And also, maybe we can get to a point where we don't need as many chips. I still think we're going to need lots of chips still, but you get my point. And this is what's great about open source, is that if open source does something better than a for-profit software, more than likely the for-profit software will do one of two things. It will look to adopt similar methods to that software and make their products better, or they'll do, unfortunately, what a few companies have done in the past and honestly have been called out on it, is basically take that software and try to make a product out of it. I think Elasticsearch and AWS, for instance, right? Like, read into that if you're curious. But I want to focus on, for-profit companies doing the good thing, where they see open source, they see the community's been built around it. They don't want to disrupt the open source, but they want to take the learnings from that and try to make their product better. And sure, for-profit companies more than likely are going to try to bleed into that market, because that's what for-profit companies do, is they look for markets to get a piece of. But I think it's very fascinating, especially with DeepSeek and all these other, I guess, frontier foundation model companies. Like, they're going to learn from what DeepSeek is doing and try to make their products better. Similarly, like if you were building a SaaS platform and there was another open source tool that did something that you were doing, maybe it's, from a telemetry perspective and you're using, open telemetry, or, maybe, orchestration, you're thinking of Kubernetes or whatever, right? Like, you're going to look at the software that you build and you're going to figure out, can I adopt that software to make my products better? Or can I take some of the learnings from that software to make my product better? And I think all of these things are great for the developer community and for consumers at large, because it's been proven time and time again that open source is extremely beneficial, not just from a, hey, let me take this free code and use it, but that code could potentially be used in other ways to make non-free products and more non-free tools better. So I wanted to just call out that like this whole thing around AI and LLMs is fascinating because we're going to learn a lot, and it's all because of open source, and I think that's a great thing. So, if you love open source, comment down below. Tell me like what you love about open source. Tell me what you're curious about with all of this LLM, open source versus closed source model stuff. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And then, as always, like, subscribe, share with your friends, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care.